Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, the clock is ticking as new tariffs are set to kick in on dozens of countries. What the president announces today about trade with Canada and Mexico and why he's sending letters to major drug companies. The Justice Department today defending President Trump's sweeping tariffs as a panel of federal judges questions his power to impose them. Arlene Richards brings us the legal update. The Senate's defense appropriations bill seeks to rapidly modernize the U.S. military to address the growing threat from the Chinese Communist Party. Luis Eduardo Martinez reports from Capitol Hill. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff met with officials in Israel today. This comes as Israel continues to receive international criticism over the aid situation in the Gaza Strip. Jason Perry brings us the latest. The U.S. is getting ready to increase pressure on Russia as Moscow is facing an upcoming deadline set by President Trump. Ariane Pozdar has more on that and on the warning Trump is sending to a former Russian president.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. The Senate Appropriations Committee reached a bipartisan consensus to advance their version of the defense budget for fiscal year 2026. Our Washington correspondent, Luis Eduardo Martinez, has the details.
You've got authoritarian regimes coordinating with each other. The North Koreans, the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranian proxies, all communicating. And the one thing they have in common, they hate us.
In a divided Congress, senators have found common ground when addressing U.S. national security threats, in particular the threat posed by the Chinese Communist Party and its anti-American axis.
Deterring China, standing with Ukraine, standing up to the increasing coordination of the People's Republic of China, Russia, Iran, and the DPRK, and modernizing the DoD with a sense of urgency because the clock is ticking.
The bipartisan consensus in the Appropriations Committee yielded a nearly $40 billion spending cut, the second year in a row that defense spending is reduced, not increased.
This bill reduces waste and duplication by making hundreds of cuts to underperforming programs and realigning those billions of dollars in savings into higher priority programs.
It expands critical munitions production, including air and missile defense interceptors, long-range missiles, and next-generation hypersonic weapons developed by our most innovative firms. It funds drone and counter-drone technologies.
The bipartisan bill also makes an important investment in the service members and their families.
From a pay increase for service members to robust child care funding to new investments in preventing suicide and sexual assault and conducting life-saving medical research. So I really appreciate the work that went into negotiating these important investments.
The Senate Appropriations Committee has already passed half of the funding bills for fiscal year 2026, and the full Senate is expected to have a vote on a trio of appropriation bills before the August recess. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is in Israel, where he met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today. This comes as Israel continues to receive international criticism on the humanitarian aid situation in the Gaza Strip. NTD's Jason Perry has the story.
A motorcade in Jerusalem, believed to be carrying U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, was seen arriving at the Israeli Prime Minister's office. On Thursday, Witkoff and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu held talks over the situation in the Gaza Strip. The White House said the U.S. will be hearing firsthand about the humanitarian situation in the territory.
Tomorrow, Special Envoy Witkoff and Ambassador Huckabee will be traveling into Gaza to inspect the current distribution sites and secure a plan to deliver more food and meet with local Gazans to hear firsthand about this dire situation on the ground.
Their meeting also comes after both the U.S. and Israel said they are now considering alternative options to return the hostages still held by Hamas. And on the same day in Jerusalem, the mother of a hostage wiped her tears at a rally calling for the release of the remaining hostages.
President Trump Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Witkoff, please end this nightmare for all the Israeli people, end this nightmare for all the families that cannot live anymore, end this nightmare for the hostages in the tunnels.
Meanwhile, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, or GHF, which is backed by the U.S. and Israel, said they have distributed almost 100 million meals since they began operations at the end of May. The GHF says they deliver aid directly to residents and not to Hamas. However, the United Nations has accused the GHF's method of distributing aid as, quote, inherently unsafe and a violation of humanitarian impartiality rules. Meanwhile, don't do this, the United Nations released footage of their humanitarian aid convoy being taken over by thousands of people in the territory. Israel has said the UN method of delivering aid allows Hamas to steal it and then use it to support its terrorist activities. In another development across Israel's northern border, Lebanon is stepping up calls for the Hezbollah terrorist group to give up their weapons. Hezbollah has exerted much control over southern Lebanon and has told the Lebanese government that they don't plan to give up their weapons, saying this would benefit Israel. The leader of Hezbollah also said that their weapons, quote, have nothing to do with Lebanon's internal affairs. Jason Perry, NTD News.
The U.S. is getting ready to increase pressure on Russia as Moscow is facing an upcoming deadline set by President Trump. But Russian attacks on Ukraine continue. At least 8 civilians are reported dead today, including a 6-year-old boy. NTD's international correspondent Ariane Pozdar has the war update.
President Trump has made clear this must be done by August 8th.
U.S. diplomat John Kelly tells the United Nations on Thursday that the U.S. is prepared to implement additional measures to secure peace in Ukraine. That's if no peace deal is reached by the end of next week. President Trump recently reduced a 50-day deadline down to 10 days, set to end next Friday. Senate Majority Leader John Thune says Republican lawmakers are ready to advance a bill sanctioning Russia if no deal is reached by then. Thune told the New York Post that Trump is somebody who's animated largely by trying to get to a peaceful solution. Thune says he knows the president might take executive action to impose further sanctions, but adds that lawmakers are ready to support Trump if needed. The State Department commented Thursday on Trump's latest deadline.
Our fundamental, our driving principle here is to end the bloodshed. That remains, that continues. That's why we've seen the engagement we have seen. That's why we've seen the actions we have seen.
Also on Thursday, President Trump responds to a threat by former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev. On Monday, Medvedev commented on Trump's 10-day deadline, saying each new ultimatum is a threat and a step towards war, not between Russia and Ukraine, but with his own country. Trump responded on Thursday, saying, "Tell Medvedev to watch his words. He's entering very dangerous territory." Meanwhile, in Ukraine's capital city, at least 8 civilians are reported dead in Kiev after a Russian attack. Among the victims is a 6-year-old boy. Almost 90 others are injured. Meanwhile, the State Department says the U.S. is still waiting for an indication that Moscow is seeking peace.
We need to see action, not words. And so the president's been very clear on that. He's been very consistent, and he's spoken on this very publicly in recent days.
Ukraine's military reports that Russia launched over 300 drones and multiple missiles during the attack. 5 missiles hit their targets directly, and over 30 drones made impact in various locations. Ariane Pozdar, NTD News.
President Trump postponing higher tariffs on Mexico as foreign leaders are phoning him with offers. NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao has more on trade now just hours away before fresh tariffs kick in.
Foreign leaders are ringing his phone, realizing this deadline is a real thing for them tomorrow, and they're bringing offers to the table.
And dozens of countries are set to face fresh U.S. tariffs starting midnight on Friday. Mexico getting some last-minute relief as President Trump announces it's giving the southern neighbor a 90-day reprieve from a 30% tariff that was set to take effect.
We have made a few deals today that are excellent deals for the country. You know, we're taking in literally trillions of dollars for the country.
Said we will continue to talk to Mexico over the next 90 days with the goal of signing a larger trade deal.
On Wednesday, the president announced a new deal with South Korea, whose team came to him with new offers. But on Thursday, the president casting doubt on reaching a deal with Canada after the country said it would recognize a Palestinian state.
Not a deal breaker, but we haven't spoken to Canada today. He's called.
Without a deal, U.S. tariffs are set to jump to 35% on Canadian imports. The White House, though, stressing that more deals could land before midnight. In another move, the president sending letters to heads of 17 pharmaceutical companies, pressing them to lower drug prices here in the U.S. in the next 2 months. The press secretary reading out a letter he sent to Eli Lilly.
Moving forward, the only thing I will accept from drug manufacturers is a commitment that provides American families immediate relief from the vastly inflated drug prices and an end to the free ride of American innovation by European and other developed nations.
Specifically, the president is calling on these companies to extend the most favored nation pricing to Medicaid and also return increased revenues abroad to American patients and taxpayers. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Iris Tao, NTD News.
As the deadline approaches for President Trump's sweeping tariffs to kick in, a case argued by the Justice Department before an appeals court today could derail most of the president's significant tariff deals. NTD's Arlene Richards reports.
The Justice Department on Thursday appealed to a federal circuit court to overturn a block on the Trump administration's global tariffs. The case comes before the court's 11-judge panel after a lower court ruled, as a matter of law, that President Trump didn't have the authority to impose the tariffs. They said a law called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act doesn't give the president that power, even if there is an emergency. Several of the judges on the panel Thursday expressed skepticism that the president could impose tariffs and that a real emergency existed. Some of the judges couldn't accept the department's reliance on a previous federal case called Yoshida.
At 583 in Yoshida, the court said, quote, "The declaration of a national emergency is not a talisman enabling the president to rewrite the tariff schedules." And because that would sound the death knell of the Constitution. So clearly, I understand Yoshida is a critical part of your case, but as others have said, you have to buy all of Yoshida. And it seems pretty clear to me that Yoshida is telling us that no, the president doesn't have the authority to rewrite the tariff schedules. And it seems like in this case, that's what the president is trying to do.
The judge highlighted a quote by the Yoshida court saying a president couldn't rewrite tariff statements. The department attorney argued that despite what that case concluded, the act itself permitted Trump to impose the tariffs, and in doing so, he didn't violate any of the limitations under the law. In response to the panel's questions about whether an emergency existed, the government attorney said this.
Whether there's an emergency, whether there's an extraordinary threat.
If they're not reviewable.
He's saying the court doesn't have the power to question the president's declaration that an emergency existed due to a spike in the trade deficit. He said only Congress could review whether a true emergency existed. Before the hearing, President Trump posted on social media, "If our country was not able to protect itself by using tariffs against tariffs, we would be dead, with no chance of survival or success." Meanwhile, the Trump administration has made some crucial trade deals this week as the looming August 1st deadline is just 1 day away. Countries who fail to secure a trade deal by Friday may face a permanent reciprocal tariff. If the court upholds the block on Trump's tariffs, it would cause a significant disruption in the president's efforts to transform the global economy and address the consequences of the trade deficit. The panel has taken the matter under advisement. It did not say when a decision would be released. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
Coming up, more ways to pay for goods. The U.S. doubling down on crypto. A tech professor tells David Lamb that America could become #1 in digital currency. And the SEC says it's getting behind President Trump's crypto vision for America with the launch of a new project. Jason Blair reports. On Capitol Hill, senators advance a bill to ban lawmakers and presidents from stock trading. The vote led to friction between President Trump and a GOP senator. Melina Weisskopf has the details. And new online safety laws in Britain are impacting free speech and even American tech businesses. The rules aim at protecting kids from harm online. But critics say the new rules reaches far further. Malcolm Hudson brings us more from London after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. The Securities and Exchange Commission launches Project Crypto. SEC Chairman Paul Atkins says the initiative is to support President Trump's vision to make America the crypto capital of the world. NTD correspondent Jason Blair reports.
Project Crypto will help ensure that the United States remains the best place in the world to start a business, develop cutting-edge technology, and participate in capital markets.
Following a report from the White House Working Group on Digital Assets, SEC Chair Paul Atkins launches Project Crypto, which will work on changing numerous laws and regulations involving cryptocurrency.
The president said last week that he wants, quote, the entire world running on the backbone of American technology. So I stand ready to help get that job done.
Atkins says the project will help bring crypto companies back to the U.S.
We will reshore the crypto businesses that fled our country, particularly those that were crippled by the previous administration's regulation by enforcement crusade and Operation Checkpoint 2.0.
Atkins vows to encourage innovation.
President Trump has described America as a nation of builders. Under my leadership, the Commission will encourage our nation's builders rather than constrain them with red tape and one-size-fits-all rules.
With Project Crypto, Atkins is directing the SEC's policy divisions to work with the Crypto Task Force.
To achieve President Trump's vision of making America the crypto capital of the world, the SEC must holistically consider the potential benefits and risks of moving our markets from an off-chain environment to an on-chain one.
Another priority, Atkins says, is to allow market participants to innovate with super apps.
Securities intermediaries should be able to offer a broad range of products and services under one roof with a single license.
The event was hosted by the America First Policy Institute in Washington, D.C. Jason Blair, NTD News.
Following the new White House digital assets report, a tech expert tells NTD's David Lamb what this could mean for businesses and consumers.
Some would call it a daring move. The White House calls it ushering in the golden age of cryptocurrency. President Trump's crypto group recently reached a milestone in crypto advancement, outlining a plan in its new digital assets report.
This report is a culmination of months of research and over 1,000 meetings between industry stakeholders and members of the President's Working Group on Digital Asset Markets.
The working group recommends that lawmakers and federal agencies improve rules and clarity on digital trading.
The new administration is really serious about making the United States as the destination for the digital currency or the digital money. Crypto is like the Wild West. The Genius Act that they're talking about is like the sheriff in town to have law and order, so there will be rules for that.
One of the recommendations from the White House Working Group is the adoption of regulations on dollar-backed digital currency stablecoins. Contrary to the volatility of the popular Bitcoin or Ethereum, these stablecoins are designed to maintain the same value as the US dollar.
Another option of paying for your goods and for your purchases, like what we have now, we have all those credit cards, and then we have Google Pay and Apple Pay. Now we're going to have the crypto as an option there.
Tech expert Ahmed Benafa says companies and banks would be more comfortable with crypto because of the regulations specified by the Genius Act.
The Secretary of Treasury, he said this is going to be the golden age for the digital money or the digital dollar for the United States. And if they continue with this as careful as they are, and they are getting the feedback and doing it in a way which will gain the trust of us as the client and the consumers, it's possible that the United States will be number one in that field.
David Lamb, NTD News, California.
A Senate committee has advanced a bill to ban stock trading by lawmakers, presidents, and vice presidents. President Trump supports the idea, he says, but is unhappy about how the amendment process played out. NTD's Melina Weisskopf reports.
This bill was introduced by Senator Josh Hawley, a Republican, and a Democrat, Gary Peters. Now, it would require congressional members and their spouses to gradually divest their holdings from their financial gains in the stock market, also banning them from trading stock moving forward. It also applies to presidents and vice presidents, though key elements of this bill do not take effect until the next term. Both President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance would not be impacted by it. Here's Senator Hawley yesterday on the committee explaining why he feels such a bill is needed.
We have an interest in the work that we do. We have information that no other people get, no other members of the public have. This bill would finally redress that.
Now, Senator Josh Hawley was the only Republican on this panel to vote with Democrats to advance it out of committee, but Hawley notably also voted against an amendment put forth by Republican Senator Rick Scott that would have launched an investigation into Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi, since she's been under scrutiny over allegations that her family has benefited financially from insider knowledge. Now, because of Hawley's vote against this amendment, President Trump took to Truth Social to criticize his vote against the amendment, saying he's playing right into the Democrats' hands. When the president was asked whether or not he supports a ban on congressional stock trading, he said he supports the concept, but emphasized that he thinks it's important for Pelosi to be investigated. As for why other Republicans on this panel oppose the bill, well, some of them say that it would disincentivize qualified workers from launching a bid for office. Listen.
Would have been great. I could have had somebody really expert in international taxation, that type of thing. I could not find anybody willing to do it. So this piece of legislation, really, it's legislative demagoguery.
Though this particular bill lacks Republican support to get it through the Republican-controlled Congress, there are several such related bills that have been in discussion for several years. The most recent one is Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, who says she plans to force a vote on the House floor on one of such bills through a discharge petition, meaning that when lawmakers come back from their August recess, she plans to try to get 217 House lawmakers to sign on her petition to force a vote on this on the House floor. House leadership on both sides of the aisle say they support such an effort, though these discussions have been underway for quite some time in Congress with nothing actually coming to fruition. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
New British online safety rules are impacting free speech on the island nation and even American tech businesses. The rules aim at protecting children, but their application reaches further, even limiting discussion about illegal immigration. NTD's international correspondent Malcolm Hudson has more for us from London.
The UK's Online Safety Act aims to protect children from pornography and violent content online. It requires online companies to stop underage users from accessing harmful content. But critics of the Act say it is seriously impacting free speech in Britain and could potentially harm and undermine its relationship with the United States. New online safety protections for children came into force in Britain on July 25th. On that day, Prime Minister Keir Starmer said,
I personally feel very strongly that we should protect our young teenagers, and that's what it usually is, from things like suicide sites. I don't see that as a free speech issue. I see that as a child protection.
Protecting children is what every good parent wants. But many say the Online Safety Act goes too far. Users of sites like Reddit, X, Spotify or Facebook must verify their age to see potentially sensitive content. They must provide ID such as a driving license or a credit card. Economist Maxwell Marlowe said the way this is being rolled out is malicious.
So let's say you're criticising illegal immigration or you're looking at the rape gangs throughout the UK. That could be flagged as harmful to children.
Two issues many British citizens want fixed after years of government failures. This content shared online could be blocked for any non-age verified users in the UK. Victim of a rape gang and campaigner Sammy Woodhouse shared the heartbreaking written testimony of another rape gang survivor on X. But many users could only see this, restricted. Similarly, NTD's British Thought Leaders host Lee Hall published an interview on X about illegal immigration in the United States. But many British users cannot see it, not even Lee Hall himself. And it's not just the more sensitive but certainly legal topics like those either. Earlier I was reading a menswear thread, fashion. It was about the cultural history of which leather shoes to style with different suits. Now, I can't really imagine why, but even something as simple as that was censored and required age verification to view. This directly impacts the ability of people to engage in free and legal speech. and the Online Safety Act directly impacts American business.
The first is that this is going to directly affect usership of American companies. The second area is the fines, up to 10% of global revenue. Imagine that for Meta. That could be ginormous. That's huge amounts of money leaving the US to go to the UK over fines for content that would be perfectly legal in the US. And the third thing is actually interrupts the rights of Americans. It violates their First Amendment rights to communicate freely.
US Representative Jim Jordan told GB News that he doesn't want harmful material getting to kids, but said there is a big difference between that and political speech such as criticism of the government, and added he is very concerned about the Online Safety Act impacting free speech. Marlowe said it could even impact the US-UK trade deal.
Totally. They'll also may blow up the free trade agreement because this is such a huge thing for America. Again, as you pointed out, these social media companies, these internet providers, they are based in the US. They're huge constituents of the American government and the American economy. To have the British government come in and trample all over that, they're not going to take it. And this administration in particular is not going to allow that to happen.
Given the impact, US lawyers are already preparing to defend US tech companies, big ones as well as little ones. Preston Byrne, managing director at Byrne & Storm PC, said he is in direct contact with the White House and that the First Amendment is not for sale. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News, London.
Coming up, with President Trump's reciprocal tariff deadline approaching tonight, what will happen next? Will prices go up for Americans? And how might legal challenges impact the president's trade policy? Author Spencer Morrison joins us to discuss. During his recent visit to Scotland, President Trump criticized the EU's wind energy rollout. Experts react to his remarks as countries continue to invest heavily in renewable energy. David Vives reports from Paris. And a new film unpacking the Chinese regime's systematic cover-up of the COVID-19 pandemic. Sam Wong hears from the director and national security experts about the movie after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. President Trump's midnight deadline for other countries to strike trade deals with the U.S. is hours away. Just ahead of that deadline, the president announced a 90-day pause on higher tariffs on Mexico. And a federal appeals court heard oral arguments on whether Trump overstepped his legal authority to impose many of his tariffs. Joining us now to discuss these latest developments and more is Spencer Morrison. He's the editor-in-chief of National Economics Editorial and the author of Reshore: How Tariffs Will Bring Our Jobs Home and Revive the American Dream. Spencer, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you back. Now, we saw markets drop today ahead of the August 1st deadline when tariffs will kick in around the world. How do you read the market reaction?
I don't think the market reaction is at all helpful when we're talking about whether or not the tariff policy is good or bad. I mean, we've seen the markets fluctuate enormously. And in fact, over the course of the last month, they've been at all-time highs. So the markets are going to move around. Markets are governed by ultimately speculative rules. What we should be concerned about, though, is whether or not President Trump's tariffs are having the sort of geopolitical and macroeconomic impacts that we want to see. And what we'd like to see is whether or not they're reshoring American industry, creating jobs, and ultimately creating long-run economic growth. So, what I'd say is that the market can do what it wants to do. It's actually not really relevant to the sort of long-run economic outlook that the tariffs are designed to produce.
It does seem as the markets fluctuate, the main focus is still on China and what's in that deal. How are you reading U.S.-China relations in terms of trade following the third round of talks this week that happened in Sweden that ended without a deal?
Yeah, I'm not surprised that a final deal has not been drafted at this stage. And people have to remember that China's markets are uniquely dependent on America's market in the same way that America's markets are uniquely dependent upon China. There really is a level of dependency between the two economies, and this has been caused by the massive offshoring of American industry to China. And on top of that offshoring, of course, China has other leverage. Rare earth minerals is a really big aspect of that, right? So, when President Trump is negotiating with Europe, for example, America really holds most of the cards in the trade deal with Europe, and that's why President Trump was able to get such an amazing deal with Europe. With China, though, they're a much tougher customer, not only because their economy is so large, but also because they have a number of things that America desperately needs. They have control over rare earth minerals. We get most of our computer chips from China, for example. And this is a really big problem because we're negotiating with somebody who has leverage over us in the same way that we have some leverage over them. So the negotiations are going to be more difficult, right? China has the option of pushing back in a way that Europe obviously wasn't able to.
That wasn't just the markets reacting. The Fed kept rates unchanged yesterday, citing uncertainty around tariffs raising prices. It is a question on many people's minds. Will we see prices rise?
Yeah, I mean, I think the mainstream media and economic consensus is that tariffs ought to have caused price inflation. On the ground, that's not what we're seeing, though. What we're seeing is that inflation is roughly the same as it was last year. And I don't think this is really surprising when you look at it from a different perspective, right? These guys are, who are promoting all of this inflation talk, you have to understand, typically work for media outlets or think tanks or universities that are funded by Wall Street. And Wall Street profits enormously through the trade deficit. They profit from the difference in labor prices between different countries, and then, of course, the balance of payments, right? So when we have a trade deficit with a country, that creates enormous demand for U.S. dollars to equalize that trade deficit by way of the balance of payments. And the only way to do that is to sell assets like real estate or stocks or American debt, right? So when we run a global trade deficit, that creates a lot of demand for American dollars, and that gets plugged right back into the stock market. So there's a big incentive really for people to pay experts, so-called experts, to lie to the American people about tariffs. And that's why there's so much misinformation about tariffs floating around.
Now, also ahead of the August 1st deadline, the courts are considering the legality of Trump's reciprocal tariffs. What would be the impact on Trump's trade policy if courts rule his use of reciprocal tariffs as unconstitutional?
Yeah, so we've had a couple of cases that have been that were not favorable to the president's tariff agenda. Those were, of course, stayed on appeal. In my view, they are. I'm a lawyer, right? My view is that they are in fact legal. Of course, we'll see what the higher level courts do. But ultimately, what President Trump is doing is he's acting on delegated authority from Congress. Everybody understands that Congress has the power of the purse. They have the power to levy taxes. The presidency does not have the power to levy taxes directly. However, what Congress has done is, through a number of different acts over the last century, they've delegated authority to the executive branch in order to raise tariffs in certain situations. And the reason they've done that is because the executive branch is much more responsive and they can act a lot faster than Congress. So Congress has given the president authority to invoke tariffs depending on the context. In my view, the contexts in which these tariffs have been levied have indeed been legal. Of course, that's a question for the court. The problem is that if the court finds they're not legal, that really just undoes all of the work that the president has done. And of course, Congress is not stepping in to fill the void.
And Spencer, going back to the concerns from both the market and the Fed over the impact tariffs could have on prices, from your perspective and the book you've written, how do you see these tariffs fitting into President Trump's promise of bringing jobs back and lowering those prices for consumers?
Yeah, I think it's really important to remember, and this is the point, this is the whole point of my book, Reshore, and it is the purpose behind the president's tariff agenda. The point of tariffs is not to raise revenue in the long run. The point is to reshore the factories, bring those jobs home. Because ultimately, the economy grows when we produce more goods and services or more valuable goods and services. And the only way to do that is to realign the economy from a consumption-based economy, which is what we're currently doing. We're consuming more than we're producing, and realign it to a production-focused economy so that we're building at least as much as we're consuming, hopefully more. What we'd like to do is actually produce a surplus of goods and services that we can sell across the world, which is what fueled the rise of China, which fueled wealth in South Korea, which has kept Germany relatively wealthy. So that's what President Trump is ultimately doing. Tariffs are designed not to raise revenue in the long run. They're designed to reshore those factories. And in doing so, that will open up America's economy to benefit from technological innovations of the sort that drive long-run economic growth.
Well, Spencer Morrison, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much.
As tariff negotiations come to a head, what are the biggest wins so far for the U.S., and could the process still backfire on the economy? Hear from both sides on Capitol Report's Civil Discourse panel tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. During his recent visit to Scotland, President Trump reignited criticism of wind energy, calling it costly and environmentally harmful. As several EU countries plan to invest billions more in renewable energy, some experts advise taking these criticisms more seriously. NTD's international correspondent David Vives reports from Paris.
During his trip to Scotland, U.S. President Donald Trump lashed out at wind power, calling it a con job and a disaster for both the environment and the economy. While critics were quick to dismiss his remarks, Europe's own energy crisis suggests his claims may carry weight. Despite ambitious green targets, several EU countries are quietly walking back their reliance on renewables. In Germany, the wind turbine industry has declined by over 31% in the past 6 months, while coal and gas use have surged by 13% and 19% respectively across the bloc.
Yeah, I think windmills are a disgrace. I think they hurt everything they touch. They're ugly. They're very inefficient. It's the most expensive form of energy there is.
President Trump also highlighted that the EU wind industry's dependence on China. Energy policies expert Fabien Bouglet backs the concern.
The fact is that China is taking the lead in construction of wind turbines. It owns 80% of rare earth in the globe. It is also creating an industry based on the export of rare earths and on the export of permanent magnets used in wind turbines, made from rare earths. This also poses a problem of sovereignty for European countries.
Bouglet also warns that rare earth extraction in China is heavily polluting, a cost Europeans rarely see.
China holds the monopoly, and it's so polluting that they've moved extraction to Mongolia. In Baotou, you have radioactive mines, 32 times more radioactive than normal, and a toxic lake where acid waste is dumped after extracting neodymium, a metal used in turbines.
Trump also denounced the growing waste problem tied to wind energy, citing massive blade dumps in Texas and Wyoming, one with over 4,000 turbine blades. Bouglet says this problem is coming to Europe next.
When you look at photos from the Texas blade dump, it's striking. You see the blades of wind turbine need to be both flexible and hard, so they use things like balsa wood, and so the material used is not reusable. If you burn it, it produces fumes that cause cancer similar to asbestos cancer. There are 4,000 blades in this dump in Texas. In France, we have around 10,000 wind turbines. So that's about 30,000 pails that we will have to dump somewhere in our country in about 20 years.
France's government planned in July to invest $340 billion in renewables by 2035. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
A panel on Capitol Hill today discusses a new film that exposes the Chinese regime's cover-up of the COVID-19 pandemic. NTD's Sam Wong has the story.
I would recommend it to my whole family, the world, because everyone needs to see this.
I felt that what I was watching was a big giveaway with of accurate details that could actually be happening today.
Pages of history always turn. What side are you on? Will be the true heritage you leave for the generations to come.
On Capitol Hill, a panel Thursday discusses a new movie titled The Unrestricted War. The film portrays how the Chinese Communist Party systematically concealed the origin of the COVID-19 pandemic, which ultimately led to a global outbreak.
We hope it can spark meaningful reflections and conversations, and also give people the courage to make the right decision when facing a difficult situation like this.
How'd you even get these numbers? A drama based on true events, The Unrestricted War follows a Canadian virologist who spearheads a biotech venture in China. He is suddenly kidnapped by military agents in order to steal a sample of his own work from a Canadian lab.
They both exhibit high temperatures.
As people began to show signs of sickness, his conscience is put to test.
This is an absolutely stunning film. We must awaken to the reality that these people are intent on our destruction. Again, the Chinese Communist Party. And they are well advanced in accomplishing it through unrestricted warfare.
The film's title, Unrestricted War, comes from an actual strategy developed by a senior Chinese military officer. Its goal is to compromise nations from within through malign influence without firing a single shot.
Unrestricted war takes it to you, your families, in your bedrooms, in your businesses, in your family rooms, and on the street. It's everything short of war, everything short of conventional war. There's 150 methods to weaken your enemy from within, to make them capitulate and to take them out.
And the people who participated in the film's production are also victims of the CCP's unrestricted warfare.
We've been receiving harassments from the local government officials and warnings and threats from the National Security Office. And some of my family members' income got cut off by the local government.
The Unrestricted War premieres August 8th on Ganjin World Plus. For more information, be sure to visit gjw.us/unrestrictedwar for details. Reporting from Capitol Hill, Sam Wang, NTD News.
Coming up in baseball, a flurry of trades going on today, including a shocking deal sending an all-star back to Houston. Dave Martin joins us with the details when we come back. Now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, plenty going on right now, but let's start in baseball as the league's trade deadline just passed less than an hour ago. What big names were dealt over the last 24 hours?
Well, you know, up until a few minutes ago, the biggest name was probably Eugenio Suarez of Arizona getting traded to Seattle. But ESPN just reported a huge one. Two-time All-Star Carlos Correa is reportedly getting dealt from Minnesota back to Houston, where he spent the first 7 years of his career and won a World Series title with them. Now, he must have really won it out, too, because he has a full no-trade clause that he would have had to waive. Plus, the Astros already have a shortstop in Jeremy Pena. Correa is reportedly actually going to move over to third base in place of the injured Isaac Paredes. Now, this is a very nice get for the Astros, who've seen some of their best players sign elsewhere in recent years, including Alex Bregman, George Springer, and of course Correa, who's still only 30 years old. Now, despite losing a number of good players over the years, somehow they keep winning. Right now, Tiff, they've got a 5-game lead in the National League West over Seattle there, so they're certainly in the driver's seat for the playoffs.
Well, speaking of Seattle, the Mariners made a big splash last night, as you mentioned, in acquiring a Eugenio Suarez of Arizona. What does he bring to their team?
Yeah, a big lineup presence for sure, to pair with Cal Raleigh. Now, with Raleigh and Suarez, they now have 2 of the top 5 home run hitters in baseball this year. Suarez has always been a very good home run hitter. This year, he's been even better. He's got 36 home runs. That's 5th in the major leagues. His 87 runs batted in are the most in baseball. Now, Raleigh, he's a switch hitter, hits much better against lefties. Suarez, meanwhile, is a righty, hits much better against righties. So they get a lot of balance here with their power hitters, too. Now, those weren't the only big names going down as well. Other big names being traded today. Cleveland dealt former Cy Young winger Shane Bieber to Toronto. Now, Bieber has only pitched like 2 games since the beginning of 2024. He's had an elbow problem, but he is signed through next year. It's questionable whether he could return this season or not. But when he does return, he's been obviously a very successful pitcher. Now, Minnesota, meanwhile, also, in addition to trading Correa, sent one of the best closers in the game. That's Yohan Duran to Philadelphia. Meanwhile, the A's also traded all-star reliever Mason Miller, as well as starter J.P. Sears to San Diego for some highly touted prospects. So a number of contenders here, and actually I should say San Diego made a number of deals today. A number of contenders really improved their major league clubs by subtracting from their minor league rosters. The trade deadline, as you mentioned, just ended a few minutes ago, 6 p.m. Eastern time. It's now about 2 months until the playoffs end. These rosters are pretty much set in stone where they are right now. So hopefully your team looks pretty good at this point. I don't know about the Royals. They look decent, Tiff. We'll see in the next couple months where it goes.
Well, you'll be watching closely. Looking at last night's games, though, as you highlighted, Shohei Ohtani getting the start for the Dodgers on the mound, but he left in the 4th inning due to cramping in his hip What is his status going forward?
Yeah, he says he's hopeful he'll make his next start. Now, that'll be August 6th against the Cardinals. Now, Ohtani really blamed the cramping on the heat yesterday. It was 90 degrees there in Cincinnati at the first pitch, 100 degrees there with the heat index. He says he started cramping there in the first inning, made it all the way to the fourth inning. It was at that point that Dodgers manager Dave Roberts pulled him after throwing 6 straight balls. 2 of those were wild pitches. Robert said he noticed Ohtani's follow-through did not look right, and that's when he pulled him. Still, it was Ohtani's longest start of the season, 3+ innings, 52 pitches, gave up 2 earned runs, 5 hits. Despite the cramping, he still stayed in the game as a designated hitter. Unfortunately, he went over 5. Dodgers lost 5-2, so a tough day in the heat for them. So, Tiff, I don't know if you can even imagine having to work, do your job in that kind of amazing heat. I'd probably be cramping up too, It'd be tough.
I'll enjoy the limited AC we have here. Shifting gears to the NFL, though, the preseason starts tonight with the annual Hall of Fame game. Now, this time it'll be the Lions versus the Chargers. What will you be watching in tonight's game?
Well, hopefully the beginning of it, because usually only the beginning is where the starters actually play. Generally, these preseason games are for rookies or undrafted players trying to make the roster. And for the starting players, coaches usually want them to come in for at least a series or two, get the feel of the game, but get out before any major injuries happen. That's including, Jared Goff and Justin Herbert, the 2 quarterbacks there. I would think they're probably out by the end of the first quarter. But it's been more than 5 months since the Eagles blew out the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. This is the first NFL action since, so I'm sure plenty of us will be tuning in. Plus, there's hardly any baseball games tonight. Just 2 games in baseball on tonight. They probably knew that this was the NFL's, preseason opening. The actual regular season opening isn't for another month. So the game starts at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. It is the Hall of Fame games was in Canton, Ohio, where the NFL Hall of Fame is. The game will be televised on NBC and Peacock.
We'll let you get home and make it for that opening then. Davis,
thank you.
Thanks for joining us. And that's all for today's news. Around the clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.